If you like good baseball, tonight is a fun night to play some MLB DFS because we have a lot of what I would call electric pitchers on tonight's slate. It's not just Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani, obviously, number one from an intrigue perspective, from an interest perspective, as he should be. But it's also Aaron Nola, who was just off this disgusting start last week. Luis Garcia facing Baltimore. I like Joe Musgrove a lot. I find him to be pretty electric. Dylan Cease is fun to watch. So from a baseball watching perspective, tonight is going to be a lot of fun. But that also does translate to DFS because I love slates where I've got choices at pitcher. I've got that for today. I've got some good stacks I want to use both in the high salary range and the low salary range. So it's going to be a fun night. Let's dive on in and get you set. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to break down Wednesday's 9-game main slate with lock set for 7:05 for tonight. There are a couple of weather notes here. Several of them are rain related. Unfortunately, that Cleveland rain out last night was maddening. Thankfully, that game not on the main slate for today, but we do have wind blowing out in New York for the Yankees and the Angels. It's out at 10 miles per hour. Temperature there is 92 degrees. So really good hitting conditions, upgrade hitters for the Yankees and the Angels, which is unfortunate because Shohei Ohtani is pitching, although he does benefit as a hitter too. So I guess it's some give and take there for sure. We have similar conditions in Philadelphia. So upgrade hitters for the Marlins and the Phillies. There's a chance of rain in Buffalo for the Blue Jays and the Mariners. It looks like the rain should be out of there by first pitch. So check back on that later, but I'd expect they're good to go. In Boston, rain is present during the game. Check back on that one later, too, to make sure it's not too heavy for the Red Sox and the Royals. And finally, rain is possible in Cincinnati for the Padres and the Reds. If I were ranking these games in terms of concern right now, I would say Cincinnati is number 1, and then Boston 2, Buffalo 3, as far as which cities may have the most annoying weather from a DFS perspective. So check back with Kevin Roth of Roto Grinders this afternoon to see what he says about them. But at least based on my initial read here, it looks like Cincinnati is the one that's most concerning, followed by Boston and Buffalo. Hey, soccer fans, this season, FanDuel and Captain Morgan are teaming up to give you a one-of-a-kind soccer contest. Introducing Captain Morgan's Soccer Pick'em, a weekly fantasy contest that is entirely free to play. The contest is simple. All you have to do is make quick predictions for Saturday games this soccer season. You'll earn points for each correct pick and compete for a chance to win up to $3,000 in prizes every single week. Head over to FanDuel and enter the Captain Morgan Soccer Pick'em today. Must be 21 plus to participate. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Eligibility restrictions apply, and don't forget to make your game day more delicious and sub in the captain. Pitching preview for this Wednesday main slate. Aaron Nola is the highest salaried pitcher on FanDuel, checking in at $11,000, followed by Luis Garcia at $10,500. Chris Bassett is $9,800. Shohei Ohtani is $9,500. We have Joe Musgrove, Steven Matz coming off the COVID IL, Dylan Cease, and Max Fried as the others $8,000 or higher for today. And Nola and Garcia, the two highest salary guys in this slate, I'm going to put both of them above Ohtani. I will say that Ohtani at $9,500 is enticing. The reason I wind up being lower on him is because both Nola and Garcia are in tremendous matchups at home, whereas Ohtani is in a tough matchup on the road. So I will rank those two higher, but I would say Ohtani to me deserves to be number 3 for tonight and worthy of exposure, despite the fact it is a really rough spot. Nola, number 1 for me. He was absolutely disgusting last time out. He faced just 22 batters, but got 12 strikeouts. If it had been like a full 9-inning game, pitch count would have been high. Maybe we're talking like a really special game there. But now Nola is back at home and facing the Marlins. And I think we need Nola at the top of our list for tonight. And the reason that start last week was interesting is because it came on the road. Typically, Aaron Nola has struggled there. If we look at him since the start of last year, on the road, his ERA is 4.90 with a 27% strikeout rate. The strikeout rate is still very high, but it's not quite as high as the 34% mark he has at home with a 2.49 ERA. That is a big gap, and it's big in the areas we care about, specifically strikeout rates. Strikeouts can deviate home versus road. We see that with Nola. So there aren't a ton of pitchers who I actively bump up a lot when they're at home, bump down on the road. Nola is one of those guys. And that big Mets start last week did come on the road, which bodes well for him tonight as he goes back home. He also does have a plus matchup here facing the Marlins, a 91 WRC plus versus righties with a 25% strikeout rate and an 8% walk rate. All three of those numbers really good for the upside of opposing pitchers. And Nola has upside to begin with. Again, he had 12 strikeouts last week against the Mets. Other games this year, he had at least 9 against the Yankees, Red Sox, Brewers, and Cardinals. And all 4 of those came at home, which is where this one will be for today. I have not always been into Nola so far this year. I love him long-term. He's tremendous. Fun guy to root for. The strikeout rate this year has been down from last year, but it's a peach spot. He's at home. Good matchup. Not the worst salary by all means. So I do want to be high on Aaron Nola as a result for tonight. He will be my number 1 pitcher on FanDuel for today. Now, Garcia is also at home in a plus spot. He's facing the Orioles. He is a guy whose movement has decreased since the sticky stuff discussion began. So that's always noteworthy. And Garcia, despite that, has still been effective. Now, you also put him, like Nola, in a plus spot at home. So I think Garcia, despite being 10-5, deserves to be number 2 for tonight. In those 4 starts with decreased movement, Garcia has a 3.84 skill interactive ERA with a 26% strikeout rate. He has still gone 6+ innings in 3 out of those 4 starts, and that's even with 3 of the 4 matchups being pretty tough ones. He faced the Blue Jays, Twins, and the White Sox. The White Sox game was at home, and in that game, Garcia allowed just 1 run across 7 innings. He had 8 strikeouts, and the White Sox, despite being better against lefties, above average versus righties as well. Now Garcia back at home. Good matchup here against Baltimore. They have an 84 WRC plus versus righties with a 25% strikeout rate and 8% walk rate. So they're pretty similar to Miami across the board, both in the strikeout and the walk departments, but they're a big boost to opposing pitchers once you combine everything that they bring to the table together. Garcia, good this whole year. We've seen him still be good despite the changed enforcement of the rules, and I think that will continue for tonight as he finally gets a plus matchup here. So Garcia today, a very good play. To me, it's Nola 1, Garcia 2, Ohtani 3. If I had to pick a top value, that guy would be Dylan Cease. With that said, he's well behind those 3 guys, and if I don't get to Cease for tonight, it's not going to bother me. It's not the same as DeSclafani a couple nights ago where I was like, I'm not going to use this guy. With Cease, I might, just because I do want to stack the Astros. I do want to stack the Blue Jays, and that's not very easy with those guys. So I might get to Cease, but I'm not actively seeking him out, which is worth noting here for sure. Cease is at least deserving of consideration. He's facing the Twins, and as we saw with Lucas Giolito last night, the Twins can make some noise. They have a 104 WRC plus against righties with still a lot of power. The good thing is that Cease is getting strikeouts recently. The spin rate is down for him, and the movement has decreased over his past 5 starts, but he still has a 3.53 skill interactive ERA in that time. His strikeout rate is 27% with a 5% walk rate, so the peripherals on Cease are really good. It is worth noting he's had 2 rough starts in that time. Those rough starts came against Houston and Cleveland, the 2 good offenses he has faced. The good starts he has had have come against Pittsburgh and then 2 against Detroit. The Twins are not Houston, but they're also not Pittsburgh and Detroit in the negative sense. They're very much in the middle ground there. And that's why I can't get myself to rank Cease above the higher salaried options, despite the fact that I do want to stack some higher salaried teams for today. But I also do think that there is a case to be made in his favor for today. So $8,200, I'm not opposed to it at times, but what I want to do is make sure my exposure is moderate with Cease. Keep it limited. Make sure I'm exposing myself more to Ohtani, to Nola, to Garcia, and making Cease more of a potential rotation piece. And again, if I don't get there, that's fine. I think that it really is about those top 3 guys for today, but Cease still pretty fun and someone I am open to using. So let's talk about the stacks, and it does come down to some high salary teams. Now, if you're using Nola, it might be tough to get to the studs on these teams. But with that said, I think that there are enough value plays here where if you pair the Jays or the Astros with a second lower salaried stack, you can make it work. So we'll start here with the high salary teams and then go through some potential value plays later on. The Jays absolute force against lefties. At least I think they will be. Like, their numbers don't necessarily bear this out, but I think long-term they will show them to be a disgusting team against lefties. A lot of powerful righties in this lineup, and it's weirdly kind of like the old school Blue Jays with Josh Donaldson, Jose Bautista, Edwin Encarnacion. They're kind of like that once again. They're facing a lefty day in just as Sheffield. So the Jays, the number one stack for me. Sheffield has seen this movement go down recently. And he was starting to struggle before that too. The decreased movement has not helped reverse that trend because over his past 4 starts, Sheffield has a 4.64 skill interactive ERA. That's not a terrible number, but the hard hit rate is up to 52%. It is 43% for the full season. So even if it does come down a bit, it'll still likely be higher than the league average. The fly ball rate for Sheffield has gone up in this time as well. It's still below average, still better than average, but it's gone up. The results for Sheffield have been rough. He has a 5.69 ERA for the full season. He let up 7 runs to the Twins in this time. He let up 4 to the Tigers as well. And the Blue Jays, at least in my eyes, are better than both those teams against lefties. So I think we need to be high on them here and bank on the fact that we can expect this team to be a force against lefties long term. And I think that the big appeal of the Blue Jays is that facing a lefty boosts up the peripheral guys. Like, we can use Vlad, Bichette, Semien against anyone, but it boosts up the non-studs in this lineup. Lourdes Gurriel, his ISO goes up to 169 versus lefties, which means that there's much more upside for him there than versus righties. His ISO is actually like 140 versus righties, but like, just feels like there's more upside there against lefties. I would also give upside boost to Randall Grichuk, Teoscar Hernandez. I would not be shocked if we see George Springer start to awaken a bit once they start to face lefties. I'm still not like actively seeking out Springer because I do worry about the nature of the injuries that he had that landed him on the injured list. But, you know, he's been fine since coming back. So to me, I think you get Gurriel, you get Grichuk, start there with the value plays and see which of the studs you can get to while using Nola or Garcia for today. I think that can work. I want to try it, but both those guys do get boosted up versus lefties, and that makes me feel better about this stack as a whole. I regret to inform you that the Astros are in play once again. This is like the 82nd time the past 2 weeks that they have been featured in stacks, and yeah, it's going to be tough to get them with Nola and Garcia, but we might be able to get there with Ohtani, and I think there are some value plays here for the Astros we can talk about as well. So let's run through them here, and then we'll get some value in our next stack. They're facing Matt Harvey, so, you know, the desire here should be fairly obvious. Harvey hasn't really changed much during the spin rate discussion. His peripherals have stayed rough. The most relevant sample on Harvey will be his past 8 starts with more curveballs. In that time, Harvey has a 4.92 skill interactive ERA. His hard hit rate allowed is up to 44%. The fly ball rate now is right around average of 36%. And he's letting up or getting a strikeout just 17% of the time. The peripherals for Harvey are bad, but the results have actually been worse. His ERA is 11.30. He has let up less than 3 runs just once, and he's let up 5+ runs 5 times in an 8-start sample. The only positive that Harvey has in his favor for today is the park. They're likely going to have the closed roof for today in Houston, which means it's cooler than a lot of other spots out east. Part of that's why I'd rank the Jays higher. The Jays game is also not super warm, but it's humid, which is good. And it's warm enough for me to bump them up to first and put the Astros second on the list for today. The one guy here outside of Abraham Toro is kind of like some salary relief is Miles Straw. He's $2,600, and I very much was not into Straw at the beginning part of the stretch. I talked about him in the Q&A, was not into him, actively poo-pooed him. I'm softening on that because over the past 2 weeks, Straw's hard hit rate is up to 39%, whereas a season-long mark is 26%. He does have some stolen base juice as well. So I'm open to it. I was not previously. I think that Straw and Toro could help us stack them with Nola. It will not be an easy task still, but I think it's worthwhile. I am open to both those guys now, whereas at least with Straw, I was not previously. So coming around to Miles Straw, which does make it easier to stack the Astros, but it'll still require some creativity with your second stack. So let's talk about a creative route for stacking the Astros and the Jays and talk about the Royals here as our third ranked stack. They're facing Martin Perez, and it seems like Perez has been impacted by the rules enforcement. We got 5 starts on him with less movement on his fastball, and Perez has a 5.68 skill interactive ERA with a 13% strikeout rate. The hard hit rate is up to 43%, which used to be kind of like the calling card for Perez back in the day, was limiting hard contact. That's not working in his favor anymore. His ERA hasn't blown up. It's 5.49 across 5 starts. It's not a big sample. I don't want to look at ERA, but I'm saying, the results have not been the worst. But I do think that they could inflate here because Perez is facing the Royals for the second time in his past 3 starts. He was good against them the first time. He allowed just 1 run on 3 hits over 5 innings. That's very good. But now the Royals have seen him recently. We saw a similar situation for Perez versus the Astros earlier in the stretch. I will say the Astros and the Royals, not equivalent, but in the first start against Houston, Perez had 7 2/3 shutout innings. The second time, they chased him after just 2 innings with 6 runs allowed. So, no, the Royals are not a slam dunk because we did just see him shut them down 2 weeks ago, and that's worth noting. If they were a slam dunk, we just take the value and rank them first in the slate. But I do think they have upside despite the risk. So I want to be high on them here when looking for salary savings. The key name to watch with the Royals is Emanuel Rivera. He just got called up from AAA. He had great power numbers there, but he left last night's game with some wrist soreness. Massive buzzkill. That means that he might not play today. I would be upset if the lineup comes out in the Q&A show today. I might sob on air if he does not play because he's $2,100 with likely bat 6th, has some power, facing a lefty. If he plays, I'll be all about Rivera. If not, we can still get some value here via Hunter Dozier and Michael Taylor. I would just be very sad. So send the good vibes, the prayer circles out to Emanuel Rivera. Get him in there for today, and hopefully we can utilize him at $2,100. I'll still go to Taylor and Dozier if not, but I really, really want a piece of Rivera there for $2,100. Let's finish up with things to watch for today. Not finish up. Got dinger calls too. Don't forget. Do not fret. Did not forget for today. Things to watch. Chris Bassett was pitching well earlier in the year. We talked about him as being like a stud here on the solo shot. He is in good pitching weather. He has a good matchup today. I will not be going there, though. It seems like he is negatively impacted by the sticky stuff discussion over his past 3 starts. Bassett has a 4.83 skill interactive ERA with a 20% strikeout rate and a 10% walk rate. Those are more stack-worthy numbers than use this guy as your pitcher. I'm not going to stack the Rangers because the weather is so bad for hitting, but I'm also not going to use Bassett, so he's off the map for me. It is Nola, Garcia, and Ohtani with sprinkles of Cease when I want to stack the Blue Jays and the Astros together. The Phillies' salaries have come down, so I could see stacking them tonight. They're actually pretty solid. They're facing Jordan Holloway. Holloway is coming back up from AAA. He had a 22% strikeout rate there, so he's not overpowering. That is similar to what we saw in the big leagues earlier this year. Holloway was doing a good job of suppressing hard contact, so again, Philly's not a slam dunk, but they're low salaried, good enough spots, good weather for today for hitting. So I would, if I were ranking out value stacks, it would be the Royals followed by the Phillies. And that does mean if we get some bad weather in the Boston game, we do still have value outlets via the Phillies versus Holloway for today. Finally, if you're looking for one more stack, I would check out the Padres. Again, check back on weather with this one too, because this is the riskiest weather game on the slate, but they're facing Vladimir Gutierrez. He is still suppressing hard contact to an extent, but starting to let up some dingers. The Padres scored 4 runs against Gutierrez 2 starts ago, and now that game is in Cincinnati, so they have some value here. And I think that they do have some lower salary guys, Will Myers, Tommy Pham's pretty low. I also like Trent Grisham as well, despite the fact he did not come through on a home run call last night. So between the Royals, the Phillies, and the Padres, there should be enough value to get up to Nola for today. And again, we also have Straw, Toro, Gurriel, Grichuk, all those guys work out well. So we should have enough value to get to the high salary pitchers for today without limiting ourselves when it comes to these stacks. All right, let's do dinger picks for today. As always, one boring pick, the chalk one, and one fun pick. The boring pick will be Yordan Alvarez, lefty facing Matt Harvey. Not the best dinger conditions, but still think that Alvarez is good enough to overcome that. So Yordan Alvarez, the boring pick for today. The fun pick will be Salvador Perez. It's the Perez versus Perez matchup as he's facing Martin Perez. So I'll go Salvador Perez or Perez. Should we do a double dong call? Sure, why not? Over 1.5 home runs for Salvador Perez for today against Martin Perez. We'll see if he's in there. Hopefully he is. Obviously, with a catcher, you never know for sure. If he's not in there, we'll give an update later on today in the Q&A show for who will take his place in the dinger call. It'd probably be Randall Grichuk if I can't go Perez. So if there's no Perez, we'll go Grichuk as the home run call for today. But as mentioned, we can talk more dingers today on the Q&A show. That is on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages at 4 p.m. Make sure you are subscribed there. Make sure you stick around at 4:30. Aaron Dolan will swing by and break down tonight's NBA game. Should be a pretty fun one, 3-2 series there. So she'll break that down at 4:30. I am on air with the MLB DFS Q&A at 4 p.m. today. Make sure you are subscribed on your platform of choice. Search for FanDuel on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, or Twitter. Hit subscribe there and get your questions in later on today. Also, make sure to subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts, because our PGA breakdown for this week is already posted with myself and Brandon Gadula talking about the Rocket Mortgage Classic, talk about whether Bryson can repeat for this week at Detroit Golf Club, roster construction, good amount of value plays for this week, and more. Find that by searching for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you tonight. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been the solo shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.